So the main focus of my podcast and what my listeners love to take away from it is we focus on the 4 areas of becoming our best selves, so to say. And we use an acronym called PIES, which stands for physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. So with that kind of framework in mind, what would you say are some of the best ways in one or all of those categories that people can cultivate being a healthier version or a better version or the version of themselves they want to be more like through the studies that you've done and the work that you've had in your practice as a psychiatrist?
Yeah. I think that the work with the unconscious is most directly related to spiritual.
Hmm.
And it's complicated. When you talk about spirituality, you're talking about things that are supernatural for the most part. The natural world is made up of, the periodic table of the elements, the standard model, fermions and bosons, those kinds of things. Spirituality goes beyond that, and it thinks about things that don't have a physical existence. Now, these things cannot be studied by science. And so it's a little bit presumptuous to approach it from a scientific standpoint. But I'm going to do that anyway.
Let's do it.
Most scientists don't believe in God. Most scientists are atheist, but most Americans do. So let's just take a hypothetical that God exists. What role would the unconscious mind, and when I say the unconscious mind, I'm talking about brain circuits. I'm talking about atoms and molecules that make up neurons in the brain. What role would that have in our relationship with God? And here's what I'd say. God uses our conscious mind to reveal his existence to us. We see a sunrise. We go, oh my God, that's so beautiful. And if we're spiritual, we think about God. We're in trouble. We're lonely. We're desperate. And somebody comes up to us and they look us in the eyes and they smile and they say, let me help you. And we're like, oh, if you're religious, you're like, oh my God, I'm looking into the face of God with his kindness. So that's how we see that through the conscious mind. The unconscious mind is sort of God's back door. And that's when we experience his presence directly. Not through our senses. We don't see here. We just feel it. And that's God not stimulating the photons in our eyes or the touch receptors. He's activating these circuits in the brain that are unconscious. And that's what gives us that feeling. So I would say that if we can open up those doors, we can get a better sense of God's presence in the world by just paying attention to the natural world around us, paying attention to other human beings and their expression of love. We can get the other side by trying to open up the channels of communication between the conscious and the unconscious. And we've talked about ways to do it. There are ways of ripping that door off its hinges. And that's the use of psychedelic drugs like psilocybin, magic mushrooms, LSD. That just opens up the door and people have these intense spiritual experiences. Whether or not that leads to spiritual growth, I think is an open question. But I think that's the way my book relates to the S in PIES.
I love that. Do you believe in God?
I do, yes.
How is it being in the scientific field and community where many others don't and you do? How do you navigate that?
It's not a problem. When I'm with other scientists, we talk about science.
Yeah. You have other ways you can express what you're saying.
Yeah.
That makes sense to them.
I love science. I absolutely adore science.
Yeah.
And I see absolutely no conflict between God and science. Science will never, ever prove the existence of God.
Yeah.
If science could prove the existence of God, there would be no more need for faith.
Yeah.
And faith plays such a central role in all religious traditions. If there is a God, and obviously I may believe, but I don't know. If there is a God, that God would never destroy faith by making his existence scientifically provable. So I kind of believe, to use the scientific terms, they're orthogonal to one another. And so I'm perfectly comfortable with both, as were many great scientists. Einstein believed in God. I think the greatest scientists believed in God. And it's just your run-of-the-mill bread and butter ones who don't.